What would you do if you walked into a house where everything seemed perfectly normal, yet something was terrifyingly wrong? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Picture this. You're cleaning a beach rental on a sweltering summer morning, the kind of heat that makes the air feel thick and electric. You knock on the door of 128 Seashell Avenue, wait the required 5 minutes, then unlock the door and step inside. The air conditioning hums softly. A paperback lies open on the end table. One side of the master bed is pulled back as if someone just got up for a glass of water. Everything appears completely ordinary, except for one chilling detail. The shower has been running for hours, and there's absolutely no one inside. This is exactly what happened to a 19-year-old cleaning woman working for Ocean View Property Company on a July morning in 1998 when she discovered what would become one of South Carolina's most baffling disappearances. Sarah and Michael Thompson, a married couple from Charlotte, had simply vanished without a trace from their Crystal Coast beach rental. But here's what makes this case truly spine-chilling. They didn't just disappear. They left behind a scene so puzzling that investigators would spend the next 27 years trying to piece together what really happened that summer. Has this ever happened to you? Walked into a space that felt frozen in time, as if life had been suddenly interrupted. The Thompsons' rental car sat untouched in the driveway, keys still inside. Their suitcases remained neatly packed in the bedroom, vacation clothes folded and waiting to be worn. Credit cards, cash, jewelry, everything valuable was exactly where they'd left it. The only thing missing, strangely enough, was the bathroom mirror, ripped clean from the wall with the screws still in place, as if someone had torn it away, in desperation or rage. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because this wasn't just a simple case of tourists deciding to cut their vacation short. The beach towels were still damp on the back porch. A wine glass sat abandoned beside the couch. The house felt interrupted, like someone had opened their mouth to speak and been cut off mid-sentence. The young housekeeper would later tell investigators that something felt profoundly wrong the moment she stepped inside. Not because of what she saw, but because of what she didn't hear. Stay with me until the end, because what investigators initially dismissed as a routine missing persons case would eventually reveal something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. For 27 years, the house on Seashell Avenue kept its secrets, welcoming new guests season after season, most of whom never knew they were sleeping just feet away from evidence of one of the most disturbing crimes in recent memory. The cleaning woman finished her routine that morning, left the key in the lockbox, and clocked out by noon, never imagining that her discovery would become headline news or that the quiet beach house would harbor dark secrets hidden behind its coastal charm. She didn't think about it again until the headlines began appearing. Couple vanishes from rental home. No signs of struggle. Mystery at the beach. But sometimes the most terrifying mysteries aren't the ones that announce themselves with blood and broken glass. Sometimes they're the ones that whisper in the spaces between what you can see and what you can feel, in houses that seem too quiet, in mirrors that reflect more than they should, and sometimes it takes decades before someone finally breaks through the right wall and discovers that the house itself has been keeping score. When sheriff's deputies first arrived at the scene, they expected to find the usual signs that accompany most disappearances: broken glass, overturned furniture, maybe blood spatter on the walls. Instead, they discovered something far more unsettling. Absolutely nothing out of place. The front door wasn't forced, windows remained intact, and there wasn't a single indication of violence anywhere in the house. It was as if Sarah and Michael Thompson had simply evaporated into thin air, leaving behind only that haunting detail of the missing bathroom mirror. This complete absence of struggle created a profound shift in how investigators approached the case. Break-ins leave evidence. Kidnappings leave traces. Even voluntary departures leave logical patterns. But this was something entirely different. The cash sat untouched on the nightstand, expensive jewelry remained in plain sight, and their luggage was still perfectly organized. The transformation from a routine missing persons case to something far more mysterious happened the moment deputies realized they weren't dealing with any crime they recognized. Behind the scenes, the decision was made to treat this as an isolated incident. After all, without evidence of foul play, what could authorities really do? The house underwent a quick makeover, fresh coastal paint, some minor repairs, and a discounted listing that promised ocean breezes and relaxation. By the following summer, new families were booking stays at 128 Seashell Avenue, completely unaware of the unsolved mystery that had unfolded within those walls. But houses have a way of holding on to their secrets, and this one wasn't finished telling its story. The impact of what had happened seemed to seep into the very foundation of the building. Guests began reporting experiences that couldn't be easily explained away. Families would check in for week-long vacations only to pack up and leave after 2 nights, citing an unexplained unease that made relaxation impossible. Children refused to sleep in certain bedrooms, insisting they heard whispers coming from inside the walls. The revelations came slowly, almost like breadcrumbs leading to a darker truth. One family filed a noise complaint about scraping sounds beneath the bathroom tub that continued throughout the night. Another guest reported hearing what sounded like muffled crying coming from the air vents. A 10-year-old boy told his parents that someone was watching him from behind the bathroom mirror, the same mirror that had mysteriously vanished years earlier. Property managers began to notice a pattern emerging. Guests who booked for full weeks would suddenly request early checkouts, often in the middle of the night. Some claimed the house felt too quiet, while others described an overwhelming sense of being observed. The mindset shift from seeing this as a profitable rental to recognizing it as something potentially problematic happened gradually, but the writing was on the wall. Emma Martinez had reached one of those pivotal moments in life where everything feels like it's shifting beneath your feet. After losing her mother the previous year, she found herself holding an inheritance that felt more like a responsibility than a gift. The decision to buy the beachfront property wasn't just about real estate. It represented a complete transformation of her life's direction. As a furniture restorer from Asheville, she'd spent years bringing forgotten pieces back to life, and this house felt like her biggest restoration project yet. The real estate agent painted a picture of endless possibilities when he showed her through. 128 Seashell Avenue. No bad history, he assured her with that practiced smile agent's perfect over years of sales. Just drywall and promise. Those words would later feel like cruel irony, but at the time, they represented exactly what Emma needed to hear. She was ready for a fresh start, a journey away from the grief that had been suffocating her creative spirit. The mindset shift from city life to coastal living seemed like the perfect antidote to her recent struggles. She imagined transforming the dated rental into something beautiful, maybe even starting a small bed and breakfast. The ocean views, the potential for renovation, the chance to build something meaningful from her mother's legacy. It all felt like destiny aligning in her favor. But sometimes the universe has different plans, and those plans often reveal themselves in the most mundane moments. 2 weeks after moving in, Emma was doing the kind of routine cleaning that every new homeowner tackles. She'd been scrubbing mildew off the far wall of the master shower, focused on getting every corner spotless, when her sponge caught on something unexpected. The tile shifted under her fingers, just slightly, but enough to make her pause. It wasn't the normal resistance of grout and porcelain. There was a subtle give, a vibration that didn't belong to solid construction. The hidden truth about what lay behind that wall was about to surface, though Emma had no way of knowing it at the time. She ran her palm across the surface again, testing her initial observation. The sound it made was unmistakably hollow, like tapping on a door rather than a wall. Behind the scenes of her simple home improvement project, something far more complex was waiting to be discovered. The impact of what she was about to uncover would transform not just her life, but provide answers to questions that had haunted investigators for over 2 decades. That slight give in the tile represented a crack in a carefully constructed facade, one that had been hiding secrets since before Emma was even considering coastal real estate. The revelations that would follow her innocent cleaning session were about to turn her dream renovation into the key that unlocked one of the most disturbing mysteries in recent memory. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with that wall. When her husband David arrived home from work, she immediately pulled him into the bathroom to show him what she'd discovered. The transformation from skepticism to concern happened quickly as David tapped the tiles with his knuckles, hearing that same unmistakable hollow sound that had caught Emma's attention. The decision to investigate further wasn't made lightly. They both understood that once you start tearing into walls, there's no going back. But sometimes curiosity becomes stronger than caution, and the hidden truth behind that false barrier was calling to them in ways they couldn't ignore. David grabbed a screwdriver from their toolkit, and together they began the careful process of removing tiles that had been concealing secrets for over 2 decades. What they discovered behind those layers of crumbling drywall and damp plywood defied every expectation they'd had about their new home. The cavity stretched 3 feet deep, boxed in by structural beams and decades of accumulated dust. Using their phone flashlights, they peered into a space that felt wrong on every level, not just because it wasn't supposed to exist, but because of the atmosphere it carried, like stepping into someone else's nightmare. The impact of their first real discovery hit them both simultaneously. Emma's light caught on something pale and dirty near the bottom corner, fabric that had once been blue but was now faded to a dusty, lifeless color. As she carefully tugged at the material, it came loose with a quiet rip that seemed to echo in the confined space. The shirt was stiff with age, its fibers brittle, from years of imprisonment behind that wall. But it wasn't just the presence of clothing that sent chills down their spines. It was the condition it was in. The fabric showed clear signs of damage that couldn't be explained by simple age or moisture. Torn edges, clawed threads, areas where the material had been stretched and ripped in what appeared to be desperate attempts at escape. The revelations were written in every damaged fiber. Behind the scenes of what should have been a simple renovation project, Emma and David found themselves staring at evidence of something far more sinister. When Emma aimed her flashlight lower, the beam illuminated deep scratches carved into the wood paneling, long, curved gouges that could only have been made by human fingernails. The mindset shift from home improvement to crime scene investigation happened in that moment, as they realized they weren't just looking at abandoned belongings, but at signs of a struggle. The journey from excited, new homeowners to reluctant witnesses to something horrific was happening faster than either of them could process. These weren't random scratches or accidental damage. They were deliberate, repetitive marks that told the story of someone fighting desperately against their wooden prison. As Emma continued searching through the debris with growing dread, her flashlight beam caught something metallic glinting near the corner where the wood scratches were deepest. The transformation from curiosity to genuine fear was accelerating with each discovery, but she couldn't stop herself from reaching deeper into that hidden space. When her fingers closed around the object, she felt an unexpected warmth, not from the metal itself, but from the realization that she was touching something deeply personal, something that had been waiting decades to be found. The delicate silver bracelet felt impossibly fragile in her hands, its chain still intact despite years of concealment. 3 small charms dangled from the links: a tiny starfish, a flip-flop, and a heart that caught the light as she turned it over. The impact of seeing those engraved letters ST hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just abandoned jewelry. This was someone's treasured possession, something they would never have willingly left behind. Behind the scenes of what should have been a simple home renovation, Emma was holding evidence that would completely reshape her understanding of the house she'd bought. The mindset shift from homeowner to witness happened in that moment as she realized the hidden truth about 128 Seashell Avenue was far darker than anyone had imagined. The bracelet was still warm from her touch when she called the police, her voice shaking as she tried to explain what they'd discovered. Detective Marcus Collins had seen enough missing persons cases to recognize significance when he saw it. The moment Emma described the silver bracelet with its distinctive charms, something clicked in his memory. The revelations started falling into place as he cross-referenced her description with old case files and when he found the 1998 Thompson disappearance report, the connection became undeniable. Sarah Thompson had been wearing that exact bracelet the night she vanished. The journey from cold case to active investigation happened faster than anyone expected. Within hours, Emma's dream renovation had transformed into something entirely different. Yellow evidence tape replaced her, paint samples, forensics equipment crowded her living room, and crime scene photographers documented every inch of her hidden discovery. The decision to buy this house had seemed like destiny, but now it felt more like she'd been chosen for a purpose she never could have anticipated. The impact on Emma and David was immediate and overwhelming. Their beachfront sanctuary had become ground zero for reopening one of the region's most baffling disappearances. Detective Collins moved through their home with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent years searching for answers, and Emma could see in his eyes that this discovery meant everything to him professionally. Detective Collins pulled the original Thompson file from the archives, and the transformation in how he viewed the case was immediate. Back in 1998, Sarah and Michael Thompson were just another couple who seemed to have left their Crystal Coast vacation early without properly checking out. The mindset at the time was simple. Tourists change their plans, people get called away for emergencies. Sometimes folks just decide they don't like where they're staying. The fact that their belongings remained untouched had been puzzling, but not unprecedented. The decision to close the case as a low-priority missing persons investigation had seemed reasonable at the time. Their rental car sat in the driveway, suitcases remained packed in the bedroom, and there were no signs of struggle anywhere in the house. Behind the scenes, investigators had theorized that maybe the couple had hitched a ride with friends, or perhaps they'd had a fight and left separately. Without evidence of foul play, the case had quietly faded into the background of more pressing criminal matters. But now, with Sarah's bracelet emerging from that hidden cavity, the entire narrative was shifting. The hidden truth about what really happened at 128 Seashell Avenue was demanding a complete reevaluation of every assumption that had been made. 26 years earlier, the impact of Emma's discovery was rippling through the entire investigation, forcing Collins to consider possibilities that had never been explored. The revelations were just beginning, though. Collins made the decision to bring in specialized forensics teams equipped with technology that simply hadn't existed during the original investigation. Thermal imaging cameras and ground-penetrating radar were deployed throughout the house, scanning every wall, every floor, every ceiling for additional anomalies. The journey from treating this as a simple missing persons case to understanding it as something far more complex was happening in real time. What the advanced scanning revealed changed everything. Adjacent walls showed irregular heat signatures, suggesting multiple hidden voids throughout the house structure. The radar detected density variations that indicated deliberate modifications to the original construction. This wasn't just one hidden space. It was an entire network of concealed areas that had been engineered into the building's very foundation. The mindset shift for Collins was profound. He'd initially thought they were dealing with a kidnapping, maybe a crime of opportunity that had gone wrong. But as the scanning continued and more hidden chambers were detected, he began to realize they were looking at something far more sinister, an elaborate architectural nightmare that had been designed specifically for containment and observation. The transformation of the house from vacation rental to crime scene was becoming more complex by the hour. This wasn't random violence or even premeditated murder. This was systematic, calculated, engineered. Someone had spent considerable time, money, and expertise creating a structure designed to hold people against their will while maintaining the facade of a normal beach rental. The forensic team's luminol testing revealed what everyone had been dreading but expecting: traces of old blood scattered throughout the hidden cavity. The transformation from hopeful discovery to horrifying reality was complete when those telltale blue-green glows appeared under the ultraviolet lights. This wasn't just an abandoned hiding place or forgotten storage area. This was a scene where someone had suffered, where they had fought desperately for their freedom. The blood patterns told a story that no one wanted to read but couldn't ignore. Concentrated near those deep scratch marks in the wood, the evidence painted a picture of someone clawing frantically at their wooden prison. their fingernails breaking and bleeding as they tried to escape. The impact of seeing those scratch patterns up close was devastating. They weren't random or accidental, but systematic, repetitive marks that showed someone had been trapped there for an extended period. Behind the scenes of what should have been Emma's fresh start, the hidden truth was emerging in ways that would haunt everyone involved. The mindset shift from renovation project to criminal investigation was now irreversible. Detective Collins made the decision that would change everything for Emma and David. The entire house needed to be treated as evidence, which meant they could no longer live there. The journey from homeowners to displaced witnesses happened overnight. Emma found herself standing behind police barricades, watching as crime scene tape transformed her beachfront dream into something unrecognizable. The revelations were coming too fast for her to process emotionally. Every room she had planned to renovate, every wall she had imagined painting, every corner where she had envisioned building new memories was now potentially hiding evidence of unimaginable suffering. The forensics teams worked with an intensity that spoke to the gravity of what they were uncovering. Specialists in cadaver detection, blood spatter analysis, and architectural forensics moved through the house like surgeons, documenting every anomaly, every inconsistency, every sign that the structure had been deliberately modified for purposes that no legitimate construction project would ever require. Emma's inheritance, which had represented hope and renewal after her mother's death, had become the key to unlocking a mystery that had been waiting decades to be solved. The transformation was almost too surreal to accept. One day she was planning kitchen upgrades, and the next she was providing statements to detectives about discovery procedures and evidence preservation. The impact on their lives was immediate and total. Hotels, storage units, emergency arrangements, everything about their carefully planned coastal transition had been upended by the hidden truth that lay within those walls. David tried to maintain optimism, suggesting they could find another property, but Emma found herself obsessed with understanding what had really happened in the house they thought would be their sanctuary. The ground-penetrating radar operators worked methodically across every surface of the house, and what they discovered sent chills through the entire investigative team. Behind the far wall, the technology revealed a second cavity. This one smaller, vertical, approximately 6 feet tall and 20 inches wide. The transformation in Detective Collins' understanding of the case accelerated when the radar showed metallic objects within this new hidden space, objects that shouldn't exist in any normal residential construction. The mindset shift from investigating a single hidden compartment to realizing they were dealing with an entire network of concealed spaces was staggering. This wasn't random construction or even amateur modification. This was systematic, engineered, deliberate. The decision to deploy fiber optic cameras became crucial, because what lay behind that wall would redefine everything they thought they knew about the house's purpose. Behind the scenes of Emma's interrupted renovation, technology that simply hadn't existed during the original 1998 investigation, was revealing the hidden truth about 128 Seashell Avenue. The fiber optic lens snaked through a carefully drilled hole, transmitting images that left the forensics team in stunned silence. The narrow chamber was soundproofed with professional-grade materials, suggesting someone had invested significant resources in creating this space. But it was the contents of the chamber that truly disturbed everyone. Watching the feed, a full-length mirror dominated one wall, positioned to reflect the entire space back at whoever might be inside. Pink wallpaper covered the walls in a pattern that would be cheerful in any normal context, but here felt sinister and wrong. A small plastic vanity set sat in one corner, the kind designed for children to play dress-up, while stuffed animals lined the baseboard like silent witnesses. The impact of discovering what appeared to be a child's bedroom hidden within the walls was devastating to everyone involved in the investigation. The revelations kept building as the camera revealed more details. A small mattress on the floor, books stacked neatly in another corner, even what looked like a tea set arranged as if someone had been playing house. The journey from missing adults case to something involving children changed the entire scope and urgency of the investigation. Emma, watching from her temporary hotel room as news crews gathered outside her former home, struggled to process what was being discovered. The transformation from her dream renovation to this nightmare felt surreal, but the evidence was undeniable. Someone had created this elaborate system of hidden rooms for purposes that no one wanted to fully contemplate. The forensics team realized they weren't just looking at evidence of the Thompson disappearance anymore. They were potentially dealing with multiple victims, possibly including children, and a level of premeditation that suggested this had been planned and executed over years, maybe decades. The transformation in Detective Collins' understanding of what they were dealing with hit him like a physical blow. The discovery of that child-themed room meant this case had just exploded beyond the boundaries of a missing couple investigation. The mindset shift was profound. They weren't just looking for answers about Sarah and Michael Thompson anymore. They were potentially dealing with a serial predator who had been operating from this house for years, maybe decades. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be a normal vacation rental, someone had created an elaborate system for capturing and containing multiple victims. The impact of this realization sent shockwaves through the entire investigative team. The hidden truth about 128 Seashell Avenue was revealing itself to be far more sinister than anyone had imagined. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity, but a carefully orchestrated operation. The decision to bring in specialists in child exploitation cases became immediate and non-negotiable. The revelations were pointing toward something that required expertise beyond typical homicide investigation. Collins found himself coordinating with FBI behavioral analysts, missing children specialists, and experts in psychological manipulation. The journey from local missing persons case to potential federal investigation was happening in real time. But it was the discovery about the mirror that truly changed everything. When forensic specialists examined the full-length glass more closely, they realized it wasn't a standard mirror at all. It was two-way glass, the kind used in interrogation rooms and observation facilities. Someone standing outside the hidden chamber could watch everything happening inside while remaining completely invisible to whoever was trapped within what investigators were now calling the Princess Room. The implications of this observation setup were staggering. This wasn't just about confinement, it was about psychological manipulation, control, and prolonged surveillance. Someone had invested considerable time, money, and expertise in creating a system that would allow them to watch their victims while maintaining complete power over their environment. The transformation from vacation rental to psychological torture chamber was becoming undeniable. Emma, following the investigation from her hotel room through news reports and Detective Collins' occasional updates, struggled to process how something so evil could have existed in the house she'd fallen in love with. The journey from dream home to nightmare crime scene felt like being trapped in someone else's horror story. The forensics team's analysis revealed that the two-way mirror had been professionally installed, with proper lighting systems and viewing angles that suggested whoever built this had extensive knowledge of surveillance techniques. The hidden truth was that the house itself had been weaponized, transformed into a hunting ground disguised as a peaceful beachfront retreat. The structural engineers brought in to analyze the hidden chambers delivered a report that fundamentally changed how investigators viewed the entire operation. These modifications weren't the work of some amateur with basic construction skills. They represented a sophisticated understanding of engineering principles, load-bearing structures, and advanced building techniques. The transformation from viewing this as opportunistic crime to recognizing it as a meticulously planned operation was profound. Every element of the hidden spaces showed evidence of careful calculation and significant financial investment. The soundproofing materials were professional grade, the kind used in recording studios and high-security facilities. The ventilation systems had been carefully designed to sustain life while maintaining complete secrecy from anyone else in the house. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be simple wall modifications, someone had created an environment that could support long-term captivity without detection. The mindset required to plan and execute this level of construction spoke to a disturbing combination of technical expertise and criminal intent. This wasn't a crime of passion or even opportunistic predation. This was architectural predation, a systematic transformation of a vacation rental into a hunting ground. The impact of understanding the true scope of what had been built changed everything about how investigators approached the case. The decision to trace the property's management history became crucial when Detective Collins realized they needed to identify who had both the access and expertise to make these modifications. The revelations came quickly once they started digging into the ownership records and management contracts. Between 1997 and 1999, the house had been managed by Ocean View Property Company, and one name kept, appearing in all the relevant documentation: Robert Hayes. Hayes had been the property manager who handled the Thompson booking, filed the initial missing persons report, and then seemingly vanished himself shortly after the case went cold. The hidden truth about his disappearance was that it hadn't been coincidental. It had been strategic. Someone with his level of access to the property, combined with his knowledge of the building's structure and his ability to modify rental schedules and maintenance records, would have been perfectly positioned to create and operate this horrifying system. The journey from identifying a suspect to understanding the full scope of his capabilities was chilling. Hayes hadn't just had keys to the house. He'd had legitimate reasons to be there at all hours, bringing in contractors, scheduling repairs, managing guest transitions. The transformation of a trusted property manager into a prime suspect in multiple disappearances represented the kind of betrayal that makes people question everything they thought they knew about safety and trust. The forensics team's analysis of construction techniques and materials began pointing toward specific contractors and suppliers, creating a paper trail that investigators hoped would lead them directly to Hayes and potentially reveal the extent of his network. The decision to re-interview Margaret Wells, the original housekeeper who discovered the empty rental in 1998, proved to be a breakthrough moment in the investigation. Now, 74, and living in a nearby assisted care facility, Margaret's memory of that day remained crystal clear despite the passage of 26 years. The transformation in how investigators viewed her original testimony was immediate. Details that had been dismissed as stress responses or imagination now took on chilling significance. Margaret described walking into the house and immediately noticing the overwhelming smell of bleach near the bathroom drains. So strong, it made her eyes water. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be normal housekeeping, someone had been desperately trying to eliminate evidence. The mindset of the 1998 investigators had been to attribute these observations to trauma or confusion. But now, every detail she remembered was being treated as crucial evidence. She also recalled hearing what sounded like faint singing coming from somewhere inside the walls, a sound she'd initially thought might be a radio left on in another room. But when she searched, she couldn't locate any source for the music. The impact of understanding that this singing might have been someone trapped in the hidden chambers was devastating to everyone involved in the current investigation. The hidden truth was that Margaret had been hearing evidence of captivity, and no one had taken her seriously. Perhaps most significantly, Margaret remembered that certain walls in the house had felt hollow when she leaned against them while cleaning. She'd mentioned this detail in her original statement, but it had been dismissed as poor construction or insulation issues. The revelations about the elaborate network of hidden chambers now gave these observations their proper context. She had been detecting the very modifications that Robert Hayes had engineered into the structure. But it was the discovery in the attic that truly changed everything. During a comprehensive sweep of the property, investigators found a zip-locked bag tucked behind insulation, perfectly preserved despite decades of coastal humidity. Inside was a small journal with Sarah Thompson's name written on the first page in careful cursive handwriting. The journey from missing person to victim was about to be documented in Sarah's own words. The journal entries began normally enough: vacation observations, comments about the beautiful beach, plans for activities with Michael. But as the days progressed, the tone shifted dramatically. Sarah began documenting strange occurrences that she couldn't explain, doors that seemed to lock themselves, sounds coming from inside walls, the feeling of being watched even when she was alone. The transformation in her mental state was visible through her increasingly frantic handwriting. The most chilling entries came toward the end, where Sarah wrote about discovering that the bathroom mirror was actually two-way glass and realizing that someone had been watching her for days. Her final entries revealed her growing terror as she understood that Michael had disappeared and she was completely alone with whatever was happening in that house. Reading Sarah's journal entries in chronological order revealed a horrifying timeline that completely contradicted the official disappearance window. The transformation from vacation diary to survival documentation was evident in every page. Her entries continued for days after she and Michael were officially reported missing, documenting a nightmare that was unfolding while the outside world assumed they had simply left early. The hidden truth was that Sarah had been alive and aware, writing desperately about her deteriorating situation while investigators closed their case files. The most chilling revelation came in an entry dated 3 days after their supposed departure. Sarah wrote about hearing someone make a phone call from another room, extending their rental stay and paying additional fees in cash. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be normal vacation logistics, Robert Hayes was manipulating the timeline to buy himself more time with his victims. The mindset shift for investigators was staggering. While they had been assuming the couple left voluntarily, Sarah was actually trapped and documenting her captor's methods. Her journal described hearing children's music playing from behind the walls, sounds that now made terrifying sense given the discovery of the princess room. She wrote about finding small handprints on the two-way mirror that were too small to belong to any adult, suggesting that other victims had been held in those spaces before her. The impact of understanding that Sarah had been aware of previous victims while experiencing her own captivity added layers of psychological torture that Hayes had apparently perfected over time. The decision to investigate Hayes's background more thoroughly led Detective Collins to a demolished motel called the Blue Bucket, where former staff members remembered a regular guest who matched Hayes's description. The revelations about his activities there painted a picture of systematic preparation and testing. Witnesses recalled seeing him in room 11 with recording equipment and an unidentified female child, activities that had seemed odd at the time but hadn't raised enough suspicion to warrant investigation. The journey from property manager to predator became clearer as investigators realized the motel had served as Hayes's testing ground. The transformation of what should have been a simple accommodation into a rehearsal space for kidnapping and psychological manipulation showed the calculated nature of his crimes. Former motel employees described strange sounds coming from room 11 during his stays, complaints about unusual smells, and the fact that he always paid in cash and used different names. The hidden truth about Hayes's methodology was emerging through witness testimonies and Sarah's own documentation. He had been perfecting his techniques, learning how to control victims psychologically before moving to the more elaborate setup at the beach house. The impact of understanding that multiple victims had likely been part of his learning process before he targeted the Thompsons was devastating to everyone following the case. As investigators pressed Margaret for more specific details about that fateful morning in 1998, her memories revealed a crime scene that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. The eerie transformation in how they viewed her testimony was profound. Every detail she'd originally reported was now being recognized as crucial evidence that had been overlooked or dismissed. Margaret remembered the bathroom shower running at full force when she arrived, and the sound of water hitting the tiles had been so loud she could hear it from the front door. The mindset of the original investigation had been to treat these observations as mundane housekeeping details, but now they painted a horrifying picture of what had transpired. Margaret described finding shampoo bottles overturned and scattered across the bathroom floor, as if someone had knocked them over during a struggle. The mirror above the sink, not the missing one, but a smaller vanity mirror, had been covered in streaks and smudges that looked like desperate handprints, as if someone had been pressing against it trying to escape or hide. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be normal post-checkout cleaning, Margaret had been documenting evidence of a violent confrontation. The impact of understanding that she had been walking through an active crime scene while investigators treated it as a routine missing persons case was staggering. Her decision to mention every strange detail in her original statement had been thorough and accurate, But the hidden truth was that no one had been prepared to recognize the significance of what she was reporting. The most critical revelation came when Margaret recalled testing the bathroom walls while cleaning. She had noticed that certain sections sounded hollow when she leaned against them, completely different from the solid construction elsewhere in the house. The journey from dismissed observation to crucial evidence happened when investigators realized that Margaret had been detecting the very modifications Robert Hayes had made to create his hidden chambers. The 1998 investigators had written off her hollow wall observation as poor insulation or typical coastal construction, but Margaret's assessment had been absolutely accurate. The revelations about her expertise came from her background. She'd been cleaning houses for over 15 years and knew exactly how proper walls should sound and feel. Her transformation from witness to key evidence provider was happening in real time as investigators recognized the value of her professional experience. The forensics team now understood that Margaret had essentially mapped the location of Hayes's hidden chambers through her cleaning routine, providing them with a precise blueprint of where the modifications had been made. The impact of this realization was that they could focus their investigation on specific areas of the house that Margaret had identified as anomalous decades earlier. Her detailed recollections were providing investigators with insights into Hayes's methods that no amount of modern forensic analysis could have revealed, showing how he had left the scene, deliberately chaotic to suggest a struggle while actually maintaining complete control over his victims. The FBI behavioral analysts who examined the hidden chambers delivered findings that fundamentally changed how everyone understood Robert Hayes as a suspect. The transformation from viewing him as an opportunistic criminal to recognizing him as a methodical predator became clear through their analysis. These modifications weren't the work of someone who decided to commit crimes and figured out the logistics afterward. They represented months, possibly years, of obsessive planning and professional-level construction expertise. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be normal property management duties, Hayes had been systematically transforming the beach house into something unrecognizable. The mindset required for this level of preparation was chilling to behavioral experts who had studied serial predators for decades. The hidden chambers weren't improvised or amateur constructions. They showed evidence of engineering knowledge, understanding of structural integrity, and, most disturbing of all, careful consideration of how to sustain life while maintaining complete psychological control. The impact of understanding the timeline was staggering. Hayes hadn't encountered the Thompsons and decided to harm them. He had been preparing for victims like them long before they ever booked their vacation. The journey from property manager to architect of horror had been a calculated transformation that suggested he had been planning these crimes since taking over management of the house. The revelations about his preparation methods showed a level of premeditation that made investigators realize they were dealing with someone far more dangerous than initially suspected. But it was the DNA confirmation that sealed everything together with scientific certainty. When the laboratory results came back on Sarah's bracelet, the transformation from circumstantial evidence to concrete proof was complete. The mitochondrial DNA analysis definitively linked the bracelet found in Emma's hidden chamber to Sarah Thompson, providing the unshakable foundation needed to officially reopen the case and pursue Hayes as the primary suspect. The decision to upgrade the investigation to federal level happened immediately after the DNA confirmation. The impact of having scientific proof meant that every theory, every connection, every piece of circumstantial evidence could now be built around this solid foundation. The hidden truth about what had happened to Sarah Thompson was no longer speculation. It was documented fact supported by the most reliable evidence possible. Detective Collins found himself coordinating with FBI units, interstate task forces, and missing persons databases as the scope of Hayes's potential crimes became clear. The journey from local cold case to federal manhunt was accelerating as investigators realized they needed to find Hayes before he could harm anyone else, and they needed to understand how many other victims might be connected to his operations. The revelations about his methodical preparation suggested that the Thompsons might not have been his only victims, and the professional construction of the hidden chambers indicated he had been planning to use them repeatedly over extended periods. The most puzzling aspect of the entire investigation was the complete absence of any trace of Michael Thompson in the hidden chambers where his wife Sarah had clearly been held. The transformation from viewing this as a straightforward kidnapping case to something far more complex was happening as investigators grappled with this missing piece of the puzzle. Sarah's journal documented her growing terror about Michael's disappearance, but none of the physical evidence in the hidden spaces showed any sign that he had ever been there. Behind the scenes of the investigation, 3 theories were emerging about Michael's fate, each more disturbing than the last. The first possibility was that he had somehow escaped during the initial attack and Hayes had decided to focus solely on Sarah. The second, more sinister theory was that Michael had been killed immediately and buried elsewhere on the property. But the third possibility was the one that kept Detective Collins awake at night, that Michael had somehow been complicit in his wife's captivity. The mindset shift required to consider Michael as a potential accomplice rather than a victim was profound and troubling. The hidden truth about what really happened during those first crucial hours remained elusive, but the absence of his belongings, his DNA, or any trace of his presence in the hidden chambers was impossible to ignore. The impact of this realization meant that investigators needed to completely reevaluate their understanding of the crime's dynamics. The decision to expand the search beyond the house structure became critical when ground-penetrating radar revealed multiple anomalies beneath the foundation and throughout the property grounds. The revelations were immediate and disturbing. Irregular density patterns suggested that Hayes hadn't limited his activities to the hidden chambers inside the house. The journey from architectural investigation to full property excavation was beginning as teams realized they might be dealing with a burial ground disguised as a vacation rental. The excavation efforts around the entire property perimeter revealed the true scope of what Hayes had been planning and executing. Over the years, he managed the property. The transformation of the seemingly innocent beachfront grounds into potential crime scenes was happening as heavy equipment began systematically scanning every square foot of the lot. Cadaver dogs were brought in to assist with the search, their behavior indicating that death had indeed visited this property multiple times. The impact on Emma, watching from her hotel room as her dream property was literally torn apart, was devastating. The journey from excited new homeowner to witness in a potential serial killer investigation felt surreal, but the evidence was mounting that her inheritance had connected her to something far darker than anyone could have imagined. The forensics teams were working methodically, understanding that every anomaly detected by the radar needed to be investigated. The hidden truth about what lay beneath the sandy soil was about to be revealed through painstaking excavation work that would either confirm their worst fears or provide answers that had been buried for decades. The breakthrough came from the most mundane of sources, a rental contract extension buried in the Ocean View Property Company's archived paperwork. The transformation from routine administrative filing to crucial evidence happened when investigators realized that someone had called to extend the Thompson stay 3 days after they were officially reported missing. The hidden truth was right there in black ink on a faded carbon copy form, showing that Hayes had been actively managing the timeline of his crime while the outside world remained unaware. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be normal vacation logistics, Hayes had been buying himself precious time with his victims. The mindset required to make that extension call while Sarah was trapped in his hidden chambers showed a level of calculated control that chilled everyone involved. In the investigation, the impact of understanding this administrative detail was profound. It proved that Hayes wasn't just opportunistic, but was actively manipulating the rental system to maintain his facade of normalcy. The decision to trace that extension call led investigators to a demolished payphone outside the old Blue Bucket Motel, 20 miles south of the beach house. The revelations came through interviews with former staff who remembered a regular customer matching Hayes's description perfectly. The journey from property manager to predator was becoming clearer as witnesses described his pattern of using different aliases and always paying in cash for his stays. But it was the testimony about the young girl that transformed everything investigators thought they knew about Hayes's operations. Multiple witnesses remembered seeing him with a quiet female child, approximately 7 or 8 years old, during several of his visits to the motel. The transformation from viewing this as an isolated incident to recognizing it as part of a larger pattern was immediate and horrifying. The former motel clerk recalled that Hayes would always request room 11, the same room every time, and would often stay for just a few hours rather than overnight. The hidden truth about these brief visits was becoming clear. He was using the motel as a testing ground, a place to perfect his methods before implementing them at the beach house. The impact of understanding that there had been other victims, possibly including children, changed the entire scope of the federal investigation. The journey from missing couple case to potential serial predator investigation was accelerating, as witnesses provided more details about Hayes's behavior. They described him as polite but strange, always keeping the young girl close but never introducing her or explaining their relationship. The revelations about his systematic approach to victim acquisition and control were painting a picture of someone who had been operating for years before the Thompsons ever booked their fateful vacation. The witness testimony from former Blue Bucket Motel staff provided investigators with the confirmation they needed about Hayes's long-term operations. The transformation from scattered observations to coherent pattern recognition happened when multiple employees independently identified him from photographs, all describing the same systematic behavior over several years. His alias, Gerald Stone, had been consistently used during his stays, and every witness remembered the quiet female child who accompanied him during many of these visits. Behind the scenes of what appeared to be normal motel transactions, Hayes had been establishing a routine that allowed him to test his control methods away from his primary operation at the beach house. The mindset required to maintain these dual locations while managing his property management responsibilities showed a level of compartmentalization that behavioral experts recognized as typical of organized serial predators. The impact of understanding his operational sophistication was chilling. This wasn't someone acting on impulse, but rather a methodical predator who had been perfecting his craft for years. The decision to begin excavation beneath the house foundation was prompted by the strongest radar anomaly, located near the northwest corner of the property. The revelations came faster than anyone was prepared, for when the excavation team, working carefully through layers of compacted sand and debris, uncovered what appeared to be deliberately buried remains. The journey from searching for evidence to recovering victims was happening in real time, as a forensic anthropologist confirmed they were looking at the skeleton of a female child, approximately 7 to 8 years old. The hidden truth about Hayes's timeline was rewritten when dental records identified the remains as Sophie Reed, a girl who had been reported missing from Wilmington, Delaware in 1997, a full year before the Thompson disappearance. The transformation in how investigators understood Hayes's criminal evolution was immediate and profound. He hadn't started with the Thompsons. He had been operating for at least a year before they ever booked their vacation, and his first known victim had been a child. The impact of this discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation team and the families who had been following the case. Emma, watching the news coverage from her hotel room, struggled to process that a child had been buried beneath what she had planned to be her dream home. The journey from property owner to unwitting participant in uncovering a serial killer's burial ground felt surreal and devastating. The revelations about Sophie Reed's case opened entirely new avenues of investigation as federal agents began cross-referencing missing children reports from the mid-1990s with Hayes's known locations and employment history. The forensic evidence suggested that the quiet girl witnesses remembered from the motel might not have been Sophie, meaning there could be additional victims who had never been reported missing or whose disappearances had been attributed to other causes. The discovery of Sarah's hidden messages behind kitchen panels provided investigators with the most heartbreaking and revealing evidence of her psychological state during captivity. The transformation from victim to survivor was evident in every desperate note she had managed to hide throughout the house. Behind loose cabinet panels and inside ventilation grates, forensics teams found tourist brochures with Sarah's handwriting scrawled in the margins, documenting her growing awareness that she was being watched and her determination to leave evidence of her ordeal. One brochure contained a message that still haunts everyone who read it. "He watches me through the mirrors. I know Michael is gone, Someone needs to know what's happening here. The mindset required to maintain hope and clarity while trapped in such a nightmare spoke to Sarah's incredible strength and determination. The hidden truth was that even while experiencing unimaginable psychological torture, she had been thinking about future victims and trying to prevent others from suffering the same fate. Behind the scenes of Hayes's carefully orchestrated captivity system, Sarah had been fighting back in the only way available to her, through documentation and hidden messages. The impact of finding these communications was profound for investigators, as they provided crucial insights into Hayes's methods and timeline. Her handwriting showed the journey from confusion to understanding to determination, even as her physical situation became increasingly dire. But it was the discovery of iron bolts and shackles embedded in the foundation that truly revealed Hayes's long-term intentions. The transformation from viewing the hidden chambers as temporary holding areas to understanding them as permanent prisons was immediate and chilling. These restraints weren't improvised or temporary solutions. They were professionally installed, reinforced, and designed to withstand extended use. The revelations about Hayes's planning showed that he had never intended for any of his victims to leave alive. The forensic analysis of the restraint system revealed a level of premeditation that shocked even experienced investigators. The decision to install permanent anchoring points in the foundation showed that Hayes had been designing this space for long-term captivity from the very beginning. The hidden truth about his intentions was written in iron and concrete. This was never meant to be a crime of opportunity, but rather a sustainable operation that could continue indefinitely. The impact of understanding that Sarah had been held in what was essentially a custom-built torture chamber changed how investigators approached the psychological aspects of the case. The journey from missing person to recognized victim of systematic psychological warfare was complete, and the evidence showed that Hayes had been perfecting these methods for years before targeting the Thompsons. The forensics team's analysis of the restraint points also revealed that they had been used multiple times, with wear patterns suggesting different victims over extended periods. This discovery confirmed that Sophie Reed was likely not Hayes's first victim, and that the quiet girl from the motel might have been held in these same chambers. The forensics team's discovery of hidden recording equipment throughout the house revealed the most disturbing aspect of Hayes's operation. He had been documenting everything. Behind false panels and inside modified ventilation systems, investigators found a sophisticated network of camcorders and recording devices that Hayes had used to create what could only be described as a library of psychological torture. The transformation from property manager to predator was complete when they realized he had been systematically recording his victims' mental deterioration for his own twisted purposes. The hidden truth about Hayes's motivations became clear through hours of disturbing footage that showed his methodical approach to breaking his victim's will. The impact of viewing these recordings was devastating for investigators, but they provided crucial insights into his psychological manipulation techniques. Behind the scenes of what victims experienced as random cruelty, Hayes had been following a calculated pattern designed to achieve maximum psychological control with minimal physical evidence. The mindset required to not only commit these crimes but to document them showed a level of narcissism and control that behavioral experts recognized as extremely dangerous. The decision to preserve these recordings as evidence was difficult for everyone involved, but they provided an unprecedented look into the mind of a predator who had perfected his methods over years of practice. The journey from missing persons case to understanding systematic psychological warfare was complete, but it was Sarah's complete journal, found water-damaged but largely intact in a sealed container beneath the kitchen floor, that provided the most comprehensive account of Hayes's techniques. The revelations within its pages documented weeks of carefully orchestrated psychological manipulation that showed Hayes understood exactly how to break someone's spirit while keeping them physically alive. Her detailed observations revealed that he would alternate between seeming kindness and calculated cruelty, creating a dependency that made escape seem impossible even when opportunities arose. The transformation in Sarah's handwriting throughout the journal entries was heartbreaking to witness. Early pages showed her maintaining hope and planning escape, while later entries revealed the psychological toll of Hayes's systematic manipulation. The impact of reading her first-hand account provided investigators with a timeline that matched perfectly with the extension calls and administrative manipulations Hayes had used to buy more time with his victims. Her journal revealed that Hayes had told her Michael was dead within the first few days of captivity, using this information as psychological leverage to convince her that compliance was her only chance of survival. The hidden truth about his methods showed that he understood exactly how to use grief, fear, and false hope to maintain control over his victims for extended periods. The forensics analysis of the house's mirror systems revealed the true scope of Hayes's surveillance operation and the calculated nature of his psychological torture methods. The transformation from understanding individual hidden chambers to recognizing an integrated observation network was staggering. Behind what appeared to be normal bathroom and bedroom mirrors, Hayes had installed an elaborate system of two-way glass that allowed him to watch his victims from concealed passages running throughout the house structure. The mindset required to design and implement such an extensive surveillance system showed a level of premeditation that chilled even experienced investigators. The decision to install observation points in every room meant that his victims had never experienced a single moment of true privacy during their captivity. The hidden truth was that Hayes had been watching every moment of their psychological breakdown, studying their reactions, and adjusting his manipulation techniques based on what he observed. Behind the scenes of what victims experienced as imprisonment, Hayes had been conducting a twisted form of psychological research. The impact of understanding that he could watch his victims sleep, cry, hope, and despair while remaining completely hidden added layers of violation that went beyond physical captivity. The revelations about his observation methods showed that he had been treating human suffering like a scientific experiment, documenting responses and refining his control techniques. But it was the discovery of a hidden cassette recorder in an old motel room vent that provided the final piece of evidence investigators needed to understand the complete timeline of Hayes's crimes. The journey from speculation to confirmed fact happened when the audio recordings revealed both Sarah and Michael's voices, proving that Michael had indeed been alive during the initial captivity period, contrary to what investigators had theorized from the physical evidence. The transformation in understanding Michael's role came through listening to recordings that captured conversations between him and Sarah during their imprisonment. The impact of hearing their actual voices, documenting their fear and confusion as they tried to understand what was happening to them, was devastating for everyone involved in the investigation. The hidden truth about Michael's fate was finally revealed through audio that showed he had initially survived, but had been eliminated when he became too resistant to Hayes's control. The recordings provided insights into Hayes's methods that no amount of physical evidence could have revealed. The journey from missing persons to confirmed victims was complete, and investigators finally had the timeline and evidence they needed to pursue Hayes with certainty about the scope of his crimes and the suffering he had inflicted. The nationwide manhunt that followed would eventually lead federal agents to a quiet retirement community in Arizona, where Robert Hayes had been living under the name William Carter for over 2 decades. When they finally confronted him, he was 71 years old, working as a maintenance supervisor at a senior living facility, a position that gave him access to vulnerable people and private spaces, suggesting his predatory behavior had never truly stopped. The transformation from the methodical property manager who had terrorized the Crystal Coast to this elderly man living in plain sight was jarring, but investigators recognized the same calculating intelligence in his eyes. Hayes showed no remorse during questioning, treating the entire investigation like an intellectual exercise rather than a reckoning with the lives he had destroyed. The hidden truth about predators like Hayes is that they don't simply stop, they adapt, evolve, and find new hunting grounds. Emma Martinez eventually sold the property to the county, with the understanding that it would never be developed again. The land where so much suffering had occurred was transformed into a memorial garden for Sophie Reed, Sarah Thompson, and Michael Thompson, ensuring their stories would be remembered rather than buried. The journey from dream renovation to uncovering one of the region's most disturbing criminal operations had changed Emma forever, but she found purpose in advocating for missing persons cases and supporting forensic archaeology efforts. If you've made it this far in our exploration of this case, you understand how important it is to share these stories. Not to sensationalize tragedy, but to honor victims and educate ourselves about how evil can hide behind the most ordinary facades. The revelations we've uncovered together show why channels like this matter, why investigating these cases and bringing them to light serves a greater purpose than just storytelling. Comment below, "Justice never sleeps," if you stayed with me through this entire investigation. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. And honestly, knowing you're here on this journey with me makes creating this content worthwhile. If this exploration resonated with you, that like button helps more people discover these important stories. There's a video right here about another cold case that was solved through unexpected evidence. A story that shows how modern technology is finally giving voices to victims who waited decades for justice. Click and continue with me over there, because some mysteries deserve to be solved and some stories need to be told.